There we go. Okay. Thank you, online folks. I forgot to unmute my actual mic. Okay. You should be hearing me now. Let me know if you're not, but you should be. Okay. So let's start that over. I'm Nathan Smith. I'm the digital programming coordinator here. We teach a bunch of technology classes, and this is one of them. It's Excel Part 1. And of course, we have parts 2 through 4 coming up the next few days. A few preliminary things I always like to get out of the way before class starts. First of all, if you have questions at any point, please speak up and let me know. Don't worry if it feels like it might be sort of a silly question or or whatever. I'm not here to judge on that. The point of a technology class is for you to learn useful stuff about technology. So if that's what's happening, if you're learning something that's useful to you, then things are going great. If, on the other hand, I am saying a bunch of things and you are confused about them and you're not able to follow, things are not going well. They're off the rails at that point, even if I'm following my outline to a T. So please, if you have questions, let me know so that way we can make sure they get addressed and you're able to keep up and follow along. Obviously, here in the classroom, just shout out, raise your hand, whatever, and that'll be fine. Folks online, use the chat or the comments or whatever you have access to let me know. And we'll make sure those get addressed. Also, on that same note, I'm not bothered at all by interruptions. So if you, if you have a question, let me know. Don't worry about, oh, is this a good time to ask? It's a good time to ask. So that's that spiel. Those of us here in the classroom, if you need to use the restroom at any point, feel free to just step out. The restrooms you go out the double doors at the end of the hallway here and take a left. They're essentially at the opposite end of the hallway from the elevator and the stairwell. Let's see. Also, at the end of class, I can give you all parking stickers. So you'll be able to park for free, and hopefully we'll have enough time tomorrow and onward that I can just give those to you at the beginning of class. So that way you don't have to worry about it. Let's see. What else? Folks online, you've already done this, but keep it up. If there are technical problems, let me know as quickly as possible so that way we don't have to go over the same thing again. If we run into something and y'all weren't able to hear me, then I want to make sure we tackle that really quick so that way we can get back to the class. And okay, so and online folks also, you'll probably want the handout and the example files to follow along. Feel free to just watch and not follow along if that's better for you. And of course, you'll be able to rewatch this on the CAL's YouTube channel if you want to. So if you want to brush up later on, feel free to do that. But if you are, hey, come on in. Hey, no worries. You're good. You're good. It's a big building.
No, it took me a minute to get parked to find the
Oh, yeah, parking's hard too. Yeah. So you're totally fine.
Yeah,
oh, sure. Oh, yeah, they sure have. They've changed a lot. Let's see. Actually, hang on a sec. I'm going to get my flash drive from over there and put the example files on that computer in front of you. Let's see. I forgot I added the little thing, but it's okay. It's not going to take long. There we go. All yours. And I was just telling them a second ago, like, if you have questions at any point, speak up and let me know. I'm not averse to interruptions, so you won't be bothering me. We might get some questions from folks online as well, since it's a hybrid class. So just know that if I respond to someone who's not in the room, that's who I'm talking to. And let's see. And I can get you a parking sticker at the end of class as well. I'm Nathan, by the way.
Cynthia.
Nice to meet you.
I plan on coming all week. So
Great.
hopefully I'll be on time tomorrow.
Yeah, you're fine. I definitely have no business judging anyone who's late to stuff myself. So it's all right. Oh, come on, work with me. Okay. There we go. And all yours. Sure. So this is part one, the basics. Today what we're going to do is we're going to just we're going to learn our way around Excel. We're going to do some basic things, filling in filling in data on our spreadsheets, sorting and filtering stuff. And at the very end of class, we're going to dip our toes into formulas. Formulas are the power tools of Excel, and I want folks to get experience with those early and often. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's go ahead and dig into it. Let's see. There we go. All right, I'm going to get this off the screen here. All right, and folks who are following along online, what you'll want to do is just open that Excel file that you downloaded. It's going to have a weird long name. The service that I'm using to host those files just renames them randomly, so don't worry about that. It's not a virus or anything. It really is the example file. And then those of us here in the classroom, what you'll want to do is on the desktop, find the folder that says Classroom Files and double click on that. That should open up this little window here. You'll want to find the folder inside there that says Microsoft Excel and double click on that. Surprise, surprise. And then inside that, you'll want to double click the one that says part1.xlsx. That's the file that we're going to be using. Look for the one that says Microsoft Excel. It should be in alphabetical order and everything. Oh no, on the right, in the right-hand part of it, not over there. Yeah. Double click it. Yeah, and double click part 1 near the top. The one that's actually called part 1 though. Nope, the one that's just called part 1. Okay, online, y'all can find, I had it up on the screen earlier, but I had to take it down. Y'all can find the example files at, let me pop it in the chat there, cals.link/, where is it? Okay, yeah. So y'all can find it at cals.link/Excel files. And Megan online, yeah, folks who are here in the classroom are using the computers that we have here in the classroom. And you're welcome to do the same. If you want to come on down for the next few sessions, feel free. But you could also bring a laptop or something if you feel more comfortable with that. That's totally fine too. Okay, looks like everybody has it open. Let's go ahead and dig into some sort of, let's see. All right, we're getting some spam comments there on YouTube. Lovely. Let's see. All right, excellent. So What we're going to do is we're going to dig into how to get around in the layout here. So let's talk first about just where you find different basic stuff. Up here at the top of our Excel window, you'll have the name of the file, in this case part 1, or for y'all online, whatever weird thing it renamed it as. And then up here at the top left corner, you'll have what's called the quick access toolbar. Basically, you've got a few things here. There's a little disk icon. If you were to click on that disk icon, what it does is it updates the file with whatever changes you've made since the last time. Hey, come on in. Since the last time you saved your file. If you're starting with a brand new file, clicking that, actually I think the file should be on there. If you go to, well, I'll tell you in a sec. So what you should see is, well, if you're starting out with a brand new file, when you click this button, what it should do is update, or it should ask you for a name for the file and ask you which folder on your computer you want to store it in. Once you've done that, then it's just going to update it in the future. Then next to that are two really useful buttons, the undo button and the redo button. By the way, in some newer versions of Excel, these you'll see down here on the very left-hand side of this bar, what we call the ribbon, instead of up here at the top. Actually, there's a specific example file that you'll want to have open. This particular one that we're using in the classroom is 2013, but I have the very latest version on my laptop, and everything we're going to be talking about is almost exactly the same. Has not changed that much. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Oh, no, this is, okay, well, hang on. Yeah, your numbers are going to be different in there, though. Let me go ahead and copy that over. I'm just going to copy the new version of the file on there really quick. No worries. Let's see. Replace. We're getting new computers in here before too long. Very excited about that.
So this will work the same
Go.
on any computer, though.
Yeah, pretty much. And then Excel, part 1. Lovely. Okay. So, we've got the quick access toolbar at the top, and your undo and redo buttons is what I was getting to. So the undo and redo buttons, these exist because we're all human and we all make mistakes, right? So if you make a mistake, you can come up here, click this little arrow that's pointing off to the left. That's the undo button. And that will undo whatever the last action was you took. If you deleted some information you intended to keep, undo will bring it back. If you changed the color of something and you didn't mean to do that, click undo. It'll change it back to the way it was, etc., etc., etc. Similarly, there's the redo button next to it. So the redo button is pretty similar, but it undoes your undoing. So if you click undo and you're like, oh, I undid some work that I actually intended to keep, then you just hit the redo button and that will put it back the way it was. In fact, you can undo and redo in multiple steps if you want to. So let's say I made 3 mistakes in a row. I can click the undo button 3 times and that will undo the last 3 changes that I made. If, however, I get overexcited and I click the undo button 5 times when I meant to click it 3, no worries. I just go over here and hit redo 3 times, or excuse me, 2 times, and then I'm good to go. The only trick is you can only use redo right after you use undo. There's no time limit, but it has to be the next thing that you do after you undo. If you undo some stuff and then you make some other changes and then you realize there was some stuff you undid that you intended to keep, you're out of luck. You have to make redo the next action after you use undo. So if you click, particularly if you click undo multiple times, I would recommend just looking over your work really quickly, making sure that you undid what you intended to undo. If you didn't, then you can use the redo button, and if you did, then you can go about your business and you'll feel you'll feel a little more confident that things happened the way you wanted them to. There's also a little drop-down arrow here. You can click on that and add some other things to the drop-down menu, or to the quick access toolbar here. Don't add anything on these computers, but on your own computer, go to town. And in fact, down here at the bottom, there's a thing that says more commands. If you were to click on that, then what it's going to do is give you the option to add almost any tool, or what we call command, in all of Excel to this quick access toolbar. And that's really, really handy, because if you find yourself digging for something a lot, you can just throw it up there in the quick access toolbar, and then you'll be able to get to it pretty easily. So that's the top area here. Down below is what's called the ribbon. This is a design concept that Microsoft likes an awful lot. And basically, the way I like to think of it is kind of like a big tool chest. If you've ever been to like a mechanic's shop or a wood shop, places like that where they use a lot of tools, a lot of times they'll have like those big tool chests with a bunch of different drawers on them. And if they've got things fairly well organized, then probably they've got, say, a drawer for the screwdrivers, and a drawer for the wrenches, and a drawer for the drills, or whatever, so that they can go over to the tool chest, pull out the drawer, grab the tool they need, and then get right back to work, so they don't spend time digging through a big old pile of tools to find the tool that they need. So the ribbon is kind of like that, but for your software. Rather than having a zillion different toolbars in a zillion different places and some menus over here and some, blah, 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 whatever, instead of all that, pretty much everything you do is in the ribbon up here, and it's all organized by what it's for. So the Home tab here basically has a bunch of different tools that you'll use that folks use pretty frequently as they're moving around in Excel. So we'll talk about a few of these as we move on. We'll skip over a lot of these, to be honest, as well, but if you need them, there they are, basically. Next to that is the Insert tab. If I click on the word Insert up here, it's going to change all my tools. So now, rather than the basic commands that are found on the Home tab, we have commands that are geared towards inserting stuff into your spreadsheets. So adding a table, adding a chart, adding pictures, adding a whole bunch of stuff, some of which we'll talk about later on. The Page Layout tab here controls basically how your spreadsheets print, if you want to print them, and a few other things like that are sort of like just aesthetic layout things, more or less. Your Formulas tab up here gives you a couple of different things. Over here on the left-hand side is what's called the function library. Functions are the building blocks of formulas in Excel. If you don't understand what I mean by that, don't worry about it. We're going to talk about it later. Please don't fret about that for now. But there are a bunch of different functions in Excel, and it's not a good use of your time to memorize them all. So instead of that, Excel has this function library here, so you can quickly look up the function that you need in order to get your Excel formulas to do something. And then over here on the other side are tools to basically help you troubleshoot formulas if they're not working properly or make them work more efficiently. Over here is the Data tab. The Data tab basically allows you to manage the information that's stored in your spreadsheets or information that's being brought in from other sources outside of your Excel file. We're not going to talk about that at all, basically, during this class. If you're interested in that, feel free to look into it, and please let me know what you find out. But we're definitely not going to be covering that today because that's pretty far into the weeds, and we're not going to go quite that far into the weeds during this course. The review tab here basically has things like spell check and the thesaurus, and it's got comments. So if you're collaborating with someone, you can use comments to like point things out or suggest changes, stuff like that. And then it also has some tools for tracking changes or protecting your workbook from changes. And we'll talk about those in, I believe, part 3, 2 weeks from today. Finally, there's the View tab here. The View tab basically changes how you see your workbook without changing any of the information that's stored in it. I also have a QuickBooks tab up here, and some of y'all in the classroom will as well. We can safely ignore that. That's just because QuickBooks is installed on this computer since I used to teach a QuickBooks class. I don't even like QuickBooks, and we're going to just totally ignore that. Over here on the left is the File tab. That one's a little different. So when I click on the File tab, what it does is it takes me into this different view called the Backstage. The Backstage is essentially just a place where you can more or less deal with your Excel file as a file on your computer rather than dealing with what's stored inside of it. So you have the info here, which is basically just like all of the little details about this, what we call metadata in computer world. Again, don't stress about that, but like you can see, okay, who was logged in when this workbook was created, and how much space is it taking up on my computer. You can look for issues like accessibility problems for folks with disabilities, all sorts of stuff like that. And then we're not going to click on all of these. In fact, please don't click on all of them because some of them will lead us down a whole path. But you've got New to create a new file without closing Excel and reopening it. Open, which opens an existing Excel file on your computer. Save and Save As, which we talked about. Save is updating the existing file that you're working with new changes. Save As is giving it a new name and a new place to live and storing it there. Print, obvious. Share is just sending your file to various people online, and really it's not that interesting of a thing. Export, you can convert your file into certain other file types. You probably won't use this a whole ton. Close will close your workbook altogether without closing Excel. And then Account deals with your Microsoft account, and Options changes the settings for Excel. Don't worry about most of this stuff right now. That's all we're going to do with it, essentially. But if I want to get out of here without making any of those changes, all I need to do is click this left arrow up here at the very top of my screen, and that's going to take me right on back to the normal view that we're going to be working with most of the time. Okay, so underneath the ribbon, we have what's called the name box over here. We'll talk about that in a sec. And we have what's called the formula bar. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. And then down here, we have our actual spreadsheets. Now, I want to say something just to give you a heads up about this. You may have heard that Excel is a spreadsheet program, and indeed it is. However, Excel files are not called spreadsheets. Excel files are known as workbooks. The reason for that is, well, you can probably think about the terminology and get about halfway there. The reason for that is that Excel files can contain multiple spreadsheets, or what Excel just calls sheets, generally speaking. And just like a book can contain multiple pieces of paper with different information on them, a workbook in Excel can contain multiple spreadsheets with different sets of information on them. So, in this particular example file, we've got 2 spreadsheets. One is called Sandbox down here. That's the one we started on. And one down here is called Basic Math. And if I click on that, you'll notice things change in the middle there because we've turned the page, essentially, to a different sheet in our workbook. Your workbooks can have essentially unlimited sheets. Obviously, you want to kind of keep them closely related to each other so that You're not having to hunt through a zillion tabs down here at the bottom to find the exact information you need. But that's really handy. You can have multiple sets of information that don't directly interact with each other, and be able to interact with, and be able to send them as one file rather than having to send 10 different attachments to someone if you're emailing stuff to people or whatever. So that's the basic layout. Oh yeah, down here at the bottom is a little slider. If I click this plus sign, or if I just slide it to the right, then I'm able to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. Or if I click the minus sign or slide it to the left, I'm going to zoom out. Okay, so that's the basic layout, the lay of the land. Let's talk about entering, editing, and deleting information in our workbooks. So down here in the sheet, you'll notice it's set up in a particular way where up at the top we have all of these different columns with letters here, and we have all these different rows with numbers. If you've ever played Battleship, this is going to make a lot of sense to you. If, for instance, I'm looking at the cell that's in column D and on row 5, that cell is called D5. And, if my Battleship were here, then if someone calls out D5, then it's a hit, right? If I click around, this one is the cell that's in column G and also on row 10. That's cell G10. This one is in column B and on row 5. That's B5. And you'll notice as I click around, you can also see the name or the address of the cell up here in the name box. So it'll highlight the column and the row that you're working in, and it'll also show the address of that cell up here in the name box. So that's, to select a cell, you can just click around and click whichever cell you want to select, and you can start typing stuff in there if you want to. Another way to select the cell, or to select a cell though, and this is kind of important, is you can use the keyboard. So on your keyboard there are up, down, left, and right arrow keys, and you can use those to move your selection around like so. Super easy, not that complicated, but it's important to note because sometimes you're going to be typing something and you're not going to want to move your hand all the way back over to the mouse in order to click somewhere else. Use the keyboard instead. Sometimes it's a lot easier. Okay, so let's go ahead and put some data into our cells. To do that, I'm going to select a cell either by clicking it or by using those arrow keys to move around, and I'm going to just put something in there. Okay, there we go. So I've kind of just spread some stuff out. Y'all don't have to do the exact same thing that I did here. It's no problem. We're not going to be doing anything specific with this data here. But you can, so feel free to do whatever you want, basically. We're just going to, that's why I called this sheet the sandboxes. We're just going to be playing around here a little bit. Once you've typed something in, if you want to confirm it, you can either just type something and then click somewhere else, and it'll just stay there. Or you can type something in and press Enter on your keyboard, and that'll move you down to the next row. Or you can hit Tab on the keyboard. That'll move your selection over one cell to the right, usually. Sometimes you can also use the arrow keys, but that gets a little confusing, so we're not going to do that. Okay, cool. So we've got some cells with some stuff in them. Few things to note here. First of all, you'll notice when I type text into a cell like this, if it's something other than just a number, then it's aligned along the left-hand margin of the cell. So the word stuff starts here on the far left of the cell, and it doesn't go all the way across, essentially. However, if I put numbers into a cell, or something that Excel will treat as a number like a date, things like that, then those will show up on the far right-hand side of the cell. That's just the way Excel does it, I think just to make it easier to read, but just know that that's the case. One other thing to mention is this situation right here. So you'll notice this cell says this one doesn't have a number, but the only part of that fits here in column D is this one do, basically. And then from there on, it's bleeding over into cells or into columns E and F. So when this happens, okay. When this happens, you'll want to make sure that you're yeah, that's the phones, yeah. Basically, when this happens, you'll want to make sure that you have a you'll want to make sure that, or excuse me, when this happens, I want to be clear that this text does not live in multiple cells. It only lives in one cell, cell D8, the one that you started typing it in.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're typing and you misspell a word, and you want to go back and correct it, how do you do it where the words all together and not separated in the cell?
I'll show you in just a sec. That's a good question. Absolutely. So, so when I type something in a cell like this, because there's nothing to the right here of this cell, Excel will just let the text run on into the columns next to it. However, if I were to put something here, you'll notice it just cuts off. But the text isn't gone. If I click on cell D8 again, you'll notice it still says up here in the formula bar, this one doesn't have a number. So the text that I put in there is still there, and cells can contain whole paragraphs of text if you want them to. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it in most circumstances, but they could. But the best way to tell what's actually inside of a cell is when you have it selected to look up here in the formula bar. That way it's going to show you exactly what's in there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But to your question, and next thing I was going to cover is, what if we want to make some corrections? So let's say that I've got a little typo in here, or let's say I wanted to change doesn't to does not here. The best way to do that, in my opinion, is to select the cell by clicking it or using your arrow keys to move to it, and then just coming up here to the formula bar and clicking in there. And then, if you didn't click in quite the right spot, you can use your arrow keys on the keyboard to move the cursor, that little blinking line, around. And then you can just edit it the way you would any other text if you were in the middle of writing an email or whatever. So I'll just get rid of in''T and I'll say does not. And then once I'm done making those changes, all I need to do is press enter or hit tab or click in another cell. Doesn't matter which, honestly, just whatever's most convenient. And there we go. The changes have been made. Now let's say I'm making changes to a cell, or I'm just putting something into a cell for the first time, and I realize it was a mistake. If I've already confirmed it, then I want to use the undo, right? But if I haven't yet, you'll notice I'm still editing. I still have the little cursor down here blinking. If I'm like, oh, okay, I need to get rid of this, all I have to do is press the escape key on my keyboard, ESC at the top left of your keyboard, the very top left. When I do that, it reverts the cell to whatever it was like before, if I want to make changes to this, let's say I'm editing here, and then I hit escape, it's going to set it back to the way it was before I started making changes. So that's the best way to cancel changes that you're making to a cell. If you've got something in a cell and you want to delete it, then all you need to do is select that cell and press delete on your keyboard. Boop. Pretty easy. All right. So let's talk about selecting groups of cells, and let's talk about resizing things a little bit. So when you're working with a bunch, sometimes you'll want to make changes that affect a bunch of cells all at once. So for example, let's say that I want to make some changes to all of column C here. I'm going to come up here to the top, and I'm going to move my mouse where you'll see like the column letter light up, and you'll see that my mouse pointer turns into a black arrow that's pointing down. When I click there, it's going to select the entire column. So now I can make changes to this column all at once. So I could change the colors, I could change the font, I could delete everything in that column if I wanted to. Whatever I want to do, this allows me to select multiple cells, specifically all the cells in this column. If I want to select multiple columns, I can totally do that as well. I'm going to move my mouse up here again to where I get the down arrow, or the black arrow pointing downward. I'm going to hold down with my mouse button, and while I'm holding my mouse button, I'm going to move my mouse over and kind of drag it so that I get multiple columns selected. And I can do the same thing with rows. If you move over to where the row numbers are, you'll notice your mouse pointer turns into a black arrow pointing to the right. And you can click to select one row, or you can click and drag to select multiple rows. You can also select a bunch of cells that aren't necessarily all in a single column or row, but are together. So let's say I want to get all the cells that have stuff in them here. What I'm going to do, in my particular case at least, is I'm going to move my mouse over to cell B2 here. I'm going to hold down with my mouse button, and while I'm holding down, I'm going to drag over and then let go of the mouse button when I get down here to the bottom. When I do this, this is selecting what Excel calls a range of cells. This is kind of an important thing. I'll remind you about it tomorrow, when we do a little refresher at the beginning of class. But a range of cells is a group of cells like this that forms either sort of a rectangle or a line with no gaps. So this is all of the cells from B2 to I11, no gaps. Similarly, I could select this range of cells, and this one just forms a line, no gaps here, and this one forms a line as well, but it's horizontal instead of vertical. So that's what Excel calls a range of cells. A column or a set of columns or a row or a set of rows, those also count as ranges of cells. So you don't have to just, so it doesn't have to be just the little box that you draw here. It could be a whole lot of cells. Technically, a whole sheet is a range of cells, but most of the time when we say it, that's not what we mean. But this is really important terminology because there are a lot of situations where Excel will want you to point to a specific range of cells, and so you'll need to give sort of the address of that range. I'll show you how this is written too, and this will come back a little later toward the end of class. Let's say, okay, so this range that I had here, B2 to I11, to write that in a formula in Excel or in other places too that we'll talk about later, what I'm going to do is type B2 colon, make sure it's a colon, not a semicolon. So you'll hold shift while pressing the semicolon key, and then I11. So you're going to start with the top left cell and then the bottom right cell. When you type this in, what that tells Excel is a range of cells from B2 to I11, meaning all of these cells in this box. I had Notepad open, yeah, just to show y'all. But you won't need to type that in, stuff like that in until a little later anyway. Okay, so that's a range of cells. There's one other way to select multiple cells, which is kind of handy sometimes, and that is you can select multiple cells that aren't together as a range. The way that works is I'm going to click on the first cell that I want to select, and then I'm going to hold the Control key, CTRL, at the bottom left of my keyboard or the bottom right. Any of y'all who use a Mac, if you hold the Command key, it should do the same thing. But I'm going to hold the Control key, and I'm going to click, while I'm holding Control, I'm going to click on the other cells that I want to select. And that allows me to make changes to those. Lovely. Okay, so now that I've got them all selected, I can make changes to all these cells at once. Okay, so let's talk about resizing really quick here. So if I have I've got this data here in cell F6. Let's say that I want to widen my column to accommodate this data right here. There's a few different ways to do it. One option, kind of the simplest option, is to come up here on this borderline between columns F and G. Now I have to do it at the top. It won't work down here in the body of the cell. I have to do it at the top where column letter F and column letter G, the space between them. I'm going to hold down with my mouse button. While I'm holding down, I'm going to move my mouse over and drag until I get the column wide enough, and then I'm going to let go of my mouse button. Pretty simple. So that's one way, and of course you can narrow it the same way. Another way to do this is to click with the right mouse button on the column letter. This also works with row numbers, by the way, and click on column width here. What that's going to do is give me, there's this kind of arbitrary number of units here. 10.69 is how wide this one is. If I wanted it to be just 15 instead, I'll type it in, click OK, and now this column is 15 whatever's wide. And if I wanted to resize multiple columns, I could totally do that. So 8.54 is the width of most of these. So I'm going to click and drag here, right click, column width, and I'll change it to 8.54. Hit OK or press enter. And now all those columns are back to being the same width. One additional way to do it, which I find really super handy, is to move over again this borderline between columns F and G, and I'm going to double click on this line here. When I do that, it widens the column out to basically just a smidge over the width of the widest thing in that column. So that way it gives room for whatever the widest thing is in that column, so we don't have to worry about fiddling with it and getting it just right. We can just do that and it'll look good, and there'll be a little space there so that so that we're not confused about what's in what column, and we're good to go. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is go to up here where the column letters are, and I'm going to go to that borderline between, in this case, columns G and H, or whatever column. Basically, whichever column you're trying to widen, you want to go to the right-hand side of it. So I'm going to widen this column. So I'm going to go to the borderline between columns G and H. And then I'm going to double-click right here, where specifically you want to make sure your mouse pointer has this black line with two black arrows pointing left and right. If it doesn't, if it's this, then it's not going to do anything, or it's going to select the column. You got to go right on that borderline, double-click, and then that will widen it out to the width of the widest thing in that column. If there's nothing in that column, then it won't change anything. If there's narrow stuff in the column and the column's actually too wide, it will narrow it down. So if I do it in column E, you'll notice I just have numbers in there, so it makes it pretty narrow. All right. So, just click OK on that.
Oh, yeah.
No, you're fine. I just didn't, sometimes folks get stuck on something like that, so I didn't want you to. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and talk just briefly about what we call, or about some ways that you can format your stuff and make it look a little bit different. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this. I'm assuming y'all have all written an email before or used Microsoft Word, and this won't be unfamiliar to you if that's the case. So let's say I'm going to go up to I'm going to select a cell here, and up at the top here, you'll notice there's this font area on the Home tab. Now, if you don't have the Home tab selected up at the top, you're going to want to click Home right up here in order to see what I'm talking about. But assuming that you do have that selected, you'll see this font area right here. It says Font at the bottom. And you'll have a drop-down menu right here that says Calibri. That's the default font in Microsoft Office. And what I mean by that is just how the text looks. So if that's unfamiliar terminology to you, a font is just how all the different letters and numbers and whatnot look when you type them out or whatever. Next to that is the font. So Calibri is the default font. That's the one that you start with. But you could select any of these and change it to look pretty different if you wanted to. You can also change the font size over here where it says 11. You could type in a number and press enter, or you can click the drop-down arrow and select a number. Doesn't matter, whatever you want to do. And that'll make the text larger, or obviously if you choose something smaller than 11, make it smaller. You can do bold, italics, underlining, and of course if you click this drop-down arrow next to the U for underline, you can also change it to a double underline if that's more your speed. You also have this button, which we're going to skip over for now, but we'll come back to it. And then these two buttons change the contents of your cell in a couple of different ways. This button with the little paint bucket and the yellow swatch, if you click on that, it's just going to turn your cell yellow. If you click the arrow next to it, though, then it's going to give you a drop-down menu where you can choose whatever color you want as what we call the fill color for this cell. So it's called the fill color because it's just the color that's filling the cell, whatever it happens to be. And then once you select a color from that menu, you'll notice that color replaces the yellow as the little color swatch there. So if I wanted to fill a different cell with that same orange, I'll just click on that cell, click on the paint bucket button again, and it fills it with that orange again. So whichever color you've used most recently is going to show up there on the button. Similarly, we have this A button with the red color swatch underneath it. If I have a cell selected and I click on the A button or I click on the A or the red color swatch, it's going to turn my text red. Whoops, if I click it correctly. Next to that, though, if I click the drop-down arrow, again, I could choose a different color if I want to for the text. Whew, that's a lot going on.
Yes, in Memphis.
Oh.
But they have a Arkansas license plate.
Oh.
Amber alerts to the child taken.
Did you get that on your phone?
Yeah.
Yeah, it came up on mine too.
It came up, I guess they made a mistake on the tag.
On the tag, yeah. It's a different tag now, yeah. When it's
So why would one want to change the color of the cell?
Now, that's a good question. Basically, I mean, there are a lot of different possibilities. You might want to highlight something or color code something for people manually. We'll talk in part 3 about how to color code automatically based on the data that's in your cells. But sometimes you might want to do it manually. Sometimes you'll use the fill colors to just make things, or text color to make things just look a little more readable, or things like that. Like when I'm printing a spreadsheet, 9 times out of 10, I'll use what's called banded rows, which we'll talk about. I think in part 4, we'll end up talking about that a little bit, which is basically like alternating colors on your rows. So that way, at a glance, you can tell like which things on which row, which is harder to do if you're not, if they're all the same color. So yeah, that's a great question though. Okay, so any of this stuff you can change if you want to. Your mileage may vary. I don't find myself doing this super duper often, to be honest, but it's useful to know that it's there. Yeah.
My background is black.
So click on the cell to select it first, and then go up here. Oh yeah, by the way, if you want to remove one of these fill colors, there's something kind of important here. So I'm going to select this cell. I'm going to remove the orange from it, but click on that black cell that you have. Come up here to the top where there's the drop-down arrow next to the paint bucket, and then click on No Fill. That's the best way to do it. You can change, so when I click on No Fill like this, it's just going to remove whatever color is there, or leave it as the default color. It is possible, although it's a little convoluted, and personally I've never done this, but theoretically you could change the background color in such a way that the default color is something other than white here. If you did that, then choosing No Fill will set the color back to whatever it was before. Normally it's going to be white, and selecting No Fill will make the cell white again. What's that? Oh, you might have changed the text color to white as well. Yeah, that's it. Yep, you're exactly right. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So those are your text formatting options. That's that's pretty. It's not terribly inspiring, but it's useful sometimes. Okay, now one additional thing to point out. Down here, I've got this cell with a bunch of text in it. One additional thing to point out here is the options for kind of how the cells are, or for how text is displayed in your cell. Let me show you what I mean. So this column, I'm going to widen this one out for now. This cell says this one does not have a number, right? And if I widen this out enough, you'll notice, as I mentioned before, it's aligned along the left-hand margin of the cell. I can click one of these buttons over here. For instance, this one, this is the center button, to center my text in the cell rather than have it along the left-hand margin. Or I can align it along the right-hand margin if I want to. These buttons up here control the vertical alignment. So if I make the cell taller, you'll notice it sits at the bottom by default. But if I click over here, I can center it vertically, or I can place it at the top of my cell vertically. If I want it right in the middle, I'm going to click the middle align button, and I'm going to click the center button, and there it is. But okay, this is a really wide cell, right? So let's say, okay, I'm going to double click here to narrow this back down, and I'm going to just drag to make this cell smaller. Okay, so let's say I do want to be able to see all this text, but I don't want it to bleed over into these other columns. What I'm going to do in that situation is I'm going to use one of these two options here, wrap text or merge and center. Wrap text we'll talk about first. The way it works is you select a cell, and then you just click on wrap text. Boop. When you do that, what it's going to do is allow your text to create multiple lines inside your cell. So that way, if there's not enough horizontal space, then it'll use vertical space instead. Sometimes that's helpful because, when you're printing something out, particularly when you're printing something out, a lot of times you have plenty of vertical space because you can go onto multiple pages and stuff, but horizontal space is kind of hard to come by because you've only got that 8.5 inches or whatever of width, and you got to make it readable. So when you use wrap text, it allows the cell to expand, and once it runs out of horizontal room for the text, it moves it down to the next line, moves it down to the next line, and so forth. So we use this a lot, or I tend to at least. There's a similar option, but slightly different, called merge and center. This is particularly useful for if you have a title at the top. Let's say, okay, I'm going to put title right here. And obviously, it doesn't look much like a title when it's just the word title here and hanging out in cell B1. But let's say I want some extra space for the title. I could just make it bigger. But what that's going to do is eventually it's going to go over into these other columns. And if I want to be able to see it, then I'm going to have to keep these columns a certain width, and it's going to get really annoying. And I'm going to have to keep this row very, very tall in order to fit here. So instead of that, what I can do, I'm just going to make it 11 again. Instead of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this merge and center function. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to hold down with my mouse button, and I'm going to select all these cells from cell A1 down to cell D3 in this case. And then I'll come up to the top, and I'll click merge and center. What that does is two things. The merge part is it combines all of those cells that I had selected into one big old supercell. So that way, they all kind of act as one. And the center part is it centers the text inside the cell, as you can see. So now what I can do, I can make the text bigger, change the font or whatever if I want to. I can do all kinds of things. I can center it horizontally if I feel like it, or vertically. I don't have to have the text centered at all. I could align it along the left or along the right if I want to. No big deal. But regardless, this is going to allow me to basically use all of this horizontal space for this one piece of in this case, this one title. And then I can adjust the width of these columns and the height of these rows just based on what other data is in them, rather than worrying about making it work just perfectly for my title. So rather than designing things for a title and then kind of designing the rest of my spreadsheet around it, instead I can design my spreadsheet the way that it best fits my data, and then I can also add a title up here at the top without throwing things off. If you want to unmerge your cells, super easy. You just click merge and center again with the merged cell selected. And that's going to uncombine the cells. It is going to put the data in the top left cell of the previously merged cells. And it is going to keep all of these stylistic settings the same. So you'll notice my font is still 36. And you'll notice that's true even if I click down here. So you may have to change those settings, either select the cells and just change the settings back up here, or you can come over here. There's a button that says clear with a little eraser. If I click on that and click clear formats, that'll set everything back to the default. So the default font, the default size, the default colors, and so on. Okay, so let's talk about borders, and then we'll be done with most of the style stuff, and we can talk more about data. So we skipped over this button up here earlier. This is the borders button. And by default, what's going to happen is if you select a cell, or if you select multiple cells, clicking this button, which is actually the bottom border button, when I click on that, it's going to put a bottom border down here underneath the cells I had selected at the time I clicked it, right? So basically, it's just a black line instead of a gray line. The main difference here is that if you're going to be printing something out, then the cells that have borders, the line's going to show up. The cells that don't have borders, the line's not going to show up by default. So there's other ways to do that, but that's kind of a key way to make those border lines show up. If I click the drop-down arrow next to this bottom border button, I get a whole host of other options. So I have the bottom border button. I also have the top border button. If I click on that, lo and behold, we have a top border right here. If I click on left border and right border, you can imagine what those do. If I click no border, it's going to remove all the borders from my selection. So now they're gone. If I click on, I can also do all borders. So that's going to add a border on every side of every cell in my selection. I'll do no border again. If I click on the drop down now, I can do outside borders, which is exactly what it sounds like. And I can also do the thick box border, which is the same as outside borders, but as you might imagine, it's a thicker, darker line. So, and you can use this for a bunch of different purposes. As I said, it's helpful for printing sometimes. It's also helpful for just drawing your attention or somebody else's attention to, useful or important pieces of information on your sheets. So, you put a big border around a number, people are going to pay more attention to that number. You could add a fill color along with it if you want to, and so forth. And there's a lot of other options that you have for messing around with borders. You can change the colors. You can do double borders and all kinds of stuff. You can get really in the weeds with that, but we're not going to do that. We've got other stuff to take care of. So that's all of the style stuff, and that's all the basic things about entering information into your workbook or into your sheets. So we're gonna shift gears just a little bit, and then we're gonna shift gears a lot more. But yeah, what was your question?
And you do border on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're supposed to click and say on the border.
So yeah, you can select one cell or multiple cells depending on where you want the borders to be. What's that?
A blank cell or a blank.
Wherever you want borders to be. It doesn't matter, honestly. Doesn't have to be blank or full of stuff. Once you've got it selected, then you come up to the top, and here's this border button. If you click on the way it starts out at the beginning is with this bottom border button. So if you just click on the button right here, then it's going to give you a bottom border at the very bottom of the bottommost cells you have selected. So like, if I clicked on that, I've got B13 to D18 selected, and it gives me a bottom border along B18, C18, and D18, right? Then, though, if I click on the drop-down arrow next to that, I could fill in a top border. So that would give me a top border on top of cells B13, C13, and D13. If I want all the borders for all of these cells, then I click All Borders, and that's going to give me all of those filled in. Whichever one you click, though, that becomes the default up here. So if you wanted to use it somewhere else, then you just click on select another cell somewhere else, or another group of cells, click it, and it'll work. Does that make sense? Is that kind of a little clearer? Okay, cool. Good. All right. So let's talk about number formats. This is a pretty cool thing. One of those things that that's really fun to check out. So here's what we're going to do. let's say that I am keeping track of my budget, and I'm going to say, oh, I spent $5 one day, and I spent $32.64 another day, and I spent $51 another day, and $3.31, and $12.18. Doesn't matter exactly what those numbers are, but you'll notice that on purpose, I've been really inconsistent about how I wrote these, right? So this is just a plain number. This one is kind of a plain number, but it has a decimal point and it has the two decimal places after it like you would with a dollar amount, dollars and then cents, right? This one has a dollar sign and it's $51, but there's no cents. It doesn't even say 00, right? This one is another one with just the decimal point and then two decimal places after it. And this one has everything. It's got a dollar sign, a dollar amount, and an amount of cents, and the decimal point in between. And then you could even say something like, 15.3 for $15.30, right? So I wrote it really inconsistently, but let's say that I want it to look consistent so that it's easy for me to read what my numbers are. I'm going to come up here to the top. Now you can do this on a cell-by-cell basis, but in this case, I'm going to do it with a whole column just because it's easier that way. So I'm going to come up here to the top, at the top of this column, click on the column letter to select the whole column. And then up here, you'll notice there's a spot that says General, or a little drop-down box that says General. I'm going to click where it says General, and I'm going to change that to Currency. When I do that, all the cells I have selected, I've told Excel, treat this as an amount of money, basically. So I selected all of this, since I selected this whole column, everything that's in this column is going to be treated as a dollar amount. So $5, $32.64, $51, $3.31, $12.18, and $15.30. And if I type something else in this column, because I already selected the whole column and changed the number format, if I put, 21, then it's automatically going to change it to $21. Add the dollar sign, add the decimal point, add the cents, and all that good stuff. So this is called number formatting in Excel. Basically, the idea behind this is all the numbers that you put in Excel are basically just regular old numbers, but they have, but Excel can sort of dress them up for you so that it's easier for you to tell what they're supposed to represent. So in this case, if I can just format this whole column as currency because I know I'm going to be putting dollar amounts in this particular column, and any number that I put in there, Excel is going to treat as money, and it will format it appropriately. And there's other similar formats. For example, if I change it from currency to accounting, it's going to give me basically the same thing, except it's going to line up the decimal points here, and it's going to put the dollar signs over here. So that way, it might be a little easier to read down this column and do some mental math if you need to. Similarly, we can do dates. So let's say I take like today's date, 8/29/2022, and type September 10th over here, and I do 12/1/2019, and I do 8/3/21. Okay, there we go. So I've got some dates here, and already you can tell Excel is kind of identifying these. So I typed this in, and it basically did it exactly the way that I typed it. When I typed September 10th, it changed it to this weird format where it has the day number for the month, and then it has a 3-letter abbreviation for the name of the month. Down here, I did 12/1/2019, and it kept that pretty much as it was. And then this one, I did 8/3/21, and it changed it to 2021. So let's get it where Excel will show us all these dates in the same format. I'm going to click on the column letter up here at the top to select the whole column. I'm going to come up here where it says General again, and this time click the drop-down arrow and click on Short Date. And that's going to change all of them to be kind of this standard US format, month/day/year. If you type in a date and you don't put the year, Excel is going to assume it's this year, regardless of which year this year is. Even if it's December 31st of 2022 and you type in like August 2nd, it's going to assume that it's August 2nd, 2022. So, so just bear that in mind. If you are, if you want to, or we could change how this looks though. If I click on the drop down again and I select long date, then it's going to give me Monday, August 29th, 2022, Saturday, September 10th, 2022, Sunday, December 1st, 2019, and Tuesday, August 3rd, 2021. And you could do lots of stuff in between. You can kind of go into these settings and tweak them if you need to, but there are a lot of different options. If you go up here, basically if you wanted to change it around and see it exactly the way you want it, you could click more number formats and you can tweak those settings there. We're not going to go in depth with that, but I do want you to know that's there. So there's other number formats that you can do. You can do time, percentage, fractions, scientific notation, and text. You want to be careful with this text format because if you change a cell's format to text, then even if you put a formula in there and you want Excel to use the formula, it will not. It will treat it as just plain old text. It will also treat any numbers that are in those cells as plain old text and not a number. So you want to be careful with this. I usually don't change my cell format to text for that reason. But you know, if you need Excel to be very, very clear that what you're putting in this cell is only text and it should not be treated as a number at all, then you can, or a formula at all, then you can do that. Okay, one last thing I want to show you here. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to change this column with the dates to just the number format. By default, the number format is going to give you a number with 2 decimal places after it. So, I've got, when I changed the dates to this, it did something real weird. What it did was it changed all my dates into these serial numbers. What this is these serial numbers count from January 1st, 1900 to whatever the date is that you put in that particular cell. I believe this is called a Julian date. Don't quote me on that though. And so today, well, that's the first date I put up here, is the 44,802nd day from January 1st, 1900. Now I show you this because it's kind of silly, but also because this is the way Excel stores dates. And that means, since Excel is just doing it as a serial number, you can add and subtract dates just like you would any other number in Excel. For example, if I have December 25th, 2022, and I subtract today's date from it in Excel, that's going to tell me how many days we have until Christmas. So, so I want to show you that. It's going to be more relevant next week, but I wanted to show that to you, or tomorrow, but I wanted to show that to you now so that way you could see how Excel actually stores these dates. Okay, let's see. Anything else I missed here? No. Oh, right. One other thing, if you have a number in your cells and Excel doesn't have enough room for it, then it's going to give you this situation right here, these little hash marks. All you need to do if you see this is widen your column until you have enough room to display the whole number. So sometimes I've until I realized that, I was often baffled by these little hash marks. But that's all they mean, is there's a number, but we don't have enough width to display it, basically. Okay, here we go. Let's go ahead and shift gears here. I'm going to click on the basic math sheet down at the bottom. And we're going to talk about sorting and filtering. And we're going to dip our toes into formulas for the last little bit of class. So, first, sorting and filtering. In this example, I'm running some sort of a side business. It's probably not going super duper well because like all these dates are like, 10 or 12 years worth of dates, and it hasn't produced that much profit for me. But, I'm keeping track of it in my spreadsheet here. And what I want to do is I want to be able to look a little more closely at my data and see how things are going. Because right now, what's happening is I've got, I have names, I have dates. These are the dates that my salespeople last checked in with me. I have an income number and I have an expenses number. The income number is how much income they brought into the business, and the expenses is how much they've spent bringing that money in. But everything's in basically a random order. If I wanted to find someone, I could sort of like scan for their name, but it'd be hard to do. And so I really need a way to sort of sort this out so that I can tell what's going on. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click somewhere in this data. It doesn't really matter where. I just need to click on one of these dollar amounts or one of these dates or one of these names or on one of the column headings up here at the top. Basically, I need to make sure my cursor is not like up, my selection's not like up here where it starts or over here somewhere. It needs to be in the data set somewhere. Once I click there, then I'm going to come up to the top and I'm going to click this button that says Sort and Filter. And for those of you online, actually I'm going to hide my camera for just a moment so that you can see the button too. I'll click Sort and Filter, and then I'm going to click Filter in the menu here. When I do that, you'll notice I get 4 little arrow buttons right here next to these little drop-down arrows next to my column headings, name, date, income, and expenses. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to sort based on different criteria. So for example, if I come over here next to, and I click the drop-down arrow next to name, then I have sort A to Z, sort Z to A, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I'll just go sort A to Z first. And when I do that, I get Antoinette and her numbers here at the top, and I get Zeke and his numbers down here at the bottom. Super duper easy. So, and when you do that, as long as Excel identified all your columns with data, so I have 4 columns here, name, date, income, and expenses. As long as Excel identified all the columns you have with data in them, it will move rows together. So this is actually the date that was next to Antoinette's name before I sorted. And these are the income and expense numbers that were next to Antoinette's name. So that way I can sort my data however I want to, basically. If I want to sort based on the date, I'll click on the drop-down arrow again. I'll click Sort Newest to Oldest. And Antoinette stays at the top, the same number. But now at the bottom we have Rupali, who last checked in with us in February of 2012. If we sort based on income, I'll go largest to smallest. Looks like Zeke is the top earner with $3,089.39, and a mere $14.45 in expenses. In fact, if I sort based on smallest to largest for the expenses, Johnny is the only one who has lower expenses and has a lot less of an income number here. So I can use that to sort my data out and find it. So I can, I can use it for things like this to figure out who has the lowest expenses, who has the highest income number, when people last checked in with me or whatever. Or I can just sort it alphabetically and say, oh, you know what, I need to find Kiku's numbers. K comes after J, there she is, right? So, so that's sorting. You can also filter. So for example, let's say I only want to see the people who've checked in relatively recently. So I'm going to click on the drop-down arrow next to date, and I've got 2022, 2021, 2020. I'm going to come down here and, well, first of all, at the top of this, I'm going to uncheck the box that says select all. And that's going to unselect all the years here in my list. Then I'm going to put a check mark next to 2022 and 2021. And then down here where it says 2020, I'm actually going to click the plus sign next to that. And what that'll do is expand 2020 out. So now I see September, October, November. And what I want to do is just see essentially the second half of 2020, nothing from before June. But it looks like there are no dates from before that. If I wanted to see, well, let's say I only wanted to see fourth quarter. So September's still part of the third quarter. So I'll just select October and November and click OK. When I do that, I get all the dates from before September 2020 filtered out. So all that data it's not gone, but it's been hidden for me. And you can notice that there is some data that's been hidden by looking over here at the row numbers. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 14, 16, 19, 20, 21, 24, etc. So when you see these blue row numbers and you see it skipping numbers, you'll know there's data that's been filtered out of my view. It's not gone. If I click up here and I click clear filter from date, or if I click over here on sort and filter and I click clear, then it's going to reset that and give me all the data. But that allows you to sort of filter out data that you don't need and focus on the data that you do want to see. One other thing that you can do with this is you can, if I come up here to sort and filter and I click on custom sort, then I can sort my data based on multiple criteria, multiple options in order. So let's say that I want to sort by I'm just going to go left to right. Let's say I want to sort by the name first. So where it says sort by, there's a drop-down menu. I'm going to click on that. And again, for anybody who missed it, I'm coming up here to sort and filter, clicking on that and clicking custom sort. So in this drop-down menu here, I've got sort by. I'll click on the drop-down menu and click name. Sort on values. The other options here are cell color, font color, and cell icon, which are not quite as useful in my opinion. Usually you want to leave this on values. But the order is going to be A to Z, so I'll have, alphabetical listings, right? But there are some people with the same name. There's Joan and there's John, and there are a few other people, 2 Bences, that have the same name. So I need to get them, so I need to sort based on another thing if the name is the same. So I'm going to click Add Level, and that's going to give me another set of drop-down boxes here. I'll say Then by Date. So we're sorting based on values, and let's say we're going to go newest to oldest here. So if it's 2 people with the same name, then we're going to show the person with a newer date on top and then the older dates down below. If the date's the same, I'm going to click Add Level again, and we'll go by income number. And let's put that largest to smallest as well. And then if I want to, I could do expenses, but I'm not going to because I think it'll be the same. I'll click OK. And now when I do that, you'll notice I go down here. So I've got it in alphabetical order. There's 2 people named Bence right here. But if I look at the 2 people named Bence, one has a date of 2022 and one has a date of 2015. And the 2022 one is on top of the 2015 one. Go down here a little further. There's 2 Jones. Same deal here. 2022 date and 2018 date. 2022 is on top. And there are 3 people named John. Looks like one of them has 11/9/21 and 2 of them have January 24th, 2019. So over here, since there's a tie on name and there's a tie on date, over here I've got the higher income number at the top. So this John had $874.89 in income. This one had $232.59. So that one is lower. And you can use this custom sort to be able to sort your data in exactly the same order. That's particularly useful if you have multiple sets of data that are formatted the same way. So like if these are my, if these are my records, but then there are 16 other salespeople who are keeping similar records, if somebody wanted to compare all of those, then they could use the same custom sorting on each person's records, and they'd see and they'd be laid out in the exact same way. Yeah.
On here, where we, it was some formula that we did.
When you filtered it?
When I filtered it, but we went up here to clear, and when I did that, it still kept these names over here. It didn't bring up the rest of them.
Okay, so you might try selecting a cell that's in there first. So like, yeah. And then click sort and filter. Oh, that clear is not the one. This one clears information from a particular cell or a group of cells you have selected. If you go sort and filter and then you click clear in there, it's going to filter it out, or it's going to unfilter. That's good clarification. Okay, so we'll spend the last few minutes on formulas. We're going to dip our toe into formulas today. Formulas are the power tools of Excel. They might look a little scary. They're not all that scary. You'll get the hang of it. And we'll get plenty of practice in. So let's go ahead and do this. First, what I'm going to do is come up here to the income, click on that drop-down arrow, and click sort largest to smallest. And that's going to put our top salesperson at the top, which is Zeke in this case. So our top salesperson's up there. Now, let's say that I always sort it that way, that I always have the top salesperson at the top of my list, and I want that person's name to also appear over here in cell F4. To do that, I'm going to write an extremely simple formula. Here we go. So I'm going to click in cell F4 to select it, and then once I've got it selected, now this is not strictly necessary, but I definitely encourage you to do it. Whenever I'm typing a formula, what I like to do is come up to the top in the formula bar and click there, and then start typing my formula. The reason for that is it's easier to correct mistakes if I'm working in the formula bar versus working inside the cell itself. So, first thing that we need to do is we need to put an equal sign. The equal sign is what triggers Excel to expect a formula. If you write the most beautiful formula that anyone has ever seen, a formula that would make the developers of Excel cry from the sheer beauty of it, but you do not put an equal sign at the beginning, it is not a formula and it's not going to work. On the other hand, if you put an equal sign at the beginning of something that you don't intend to be a formula, Excel is still going to treat it as a formula, and it's probably going to be a little confused and give you some sort of error message. So, always start formulas with an equal sign. Never start anything else with an equal sign in Excel. That's the first rule of formulas. Okay, so we're going to put our equal sign here because we are writing a formula. So I'll hit the equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula. And then I'm going to go A4. When I type A4 in my formula bar, you'll notice that it's color-coded. So I get some blue up here, and I get blue down here where the actual cell itself is, cell A4. That helps me figure out, make sure that I'm actually pointing Excel to the right cell as I'm writing my formula, because it's easy to make a mistake when you're typing something or to misremember and not pull in the right data. So this tells me, okay, I'm pointing to the right data. When I press enter on my keyboard, there it is. Zeke's name appears here. What's happening with this formula is pretty straightforward. I'm telling Excel, this cell over here, cell F4, is equal to this cell over here, cell A4. If I click in this cell and I make a change to it, let's say instead of Zeke, it's supposed to be Zach, then cell F4 changes to match as well. So this is what formulas do. Basically, you're telling Excel there's some information somewhere. I want you to take it and I want you to give me some sort of answer based on the information that I'm providing to you. So in this case, all we're doing is saying whatever's over here in that cell, I want to show it in this cell as well. Let's do one additional formula, and then we'll wrap it up. By the way, folks who are here in person, if you have your parking slip, go ahead and grab that for me as well, and I'll give you a parking sticker. And we should hopefully be able to do that at the beginning of class next time, for the most part. I mean, if you were here a little later, that's no sort of shade on you, but hopefully we'll be able to sort that out quickly so folks have that handy. Okay. So, excuse me. And if for some reason you don't have it with you, I can give you the sticker and show you how to put it on, so you can do that when you get to the car. All right, so here's what we're going to do with our last formula for the day. I've got my equals sign, so I'm going to click in cell C2 right here, just underneath where it says total income. And we're going to write a formula that gives you the total income number for our salespeople here. So I'm going to click in cell C2 to select it. Now, if you're editing a formula still, like if there's a blinking cursor somewhere on your sheet here or wherever, you may just want to hit escape on the keyboard, ESC at the top, so that way you can select this cell and start typing in there. Okay, so I've selected cell C2. I'm going to come up to the top in the formula bar and click there. I'm going to hit my equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula, like we just talked about. And then I'm going to type the word sum, S-U-M, not sum as in some chickens, but sum as in the answer to an addition problem in math. So S-U-M. And then I'm going to open a set of parentheses. So I'm going to hold Shift while pressing 9 on my keyboard. And that'll give me a left parenthesis, Shift 9. Then inside the parentheses, I'm going to type C4 colon C100. And then I'm going to close my parentheses by holding Shift while pressing 0. Shift 0, that's going to give me a right parenthesis. You should see all of these cells right here in column C from C4 on down highlighted in blue so that we know that Excel is pointing to the right numbers. And you have some additional cells down here that are empty, but don't worry about that. This is how we want to write it for now. I'm going to hit Enter on my keyboard or press Tab or whatever. You can even click this little check mark right here if you want to. And that's going to lock in my formula. So I can now see my total income number here with all of my salespeople is $28,727.68. That's the grand total here. And that's pretty much it. We're going to dig into this formula a little bit more, and we're going to talk about some other math stuff you can do next week. We're going to talk about formulas that deal with dates. We're going to talk about, or next week, tomorrow. Usually this is weekly, but we're doing it all in a week this week. So we're going to do, so tomorrow we're going to be talking a lot more about formulas. We're going to be talking about how to make Excel do your basic math for you so you don't have to do it. How to make Excel calculate dates so you don't have to do that. And how to copy your formulas around so that you don't have to rewrite them a bunch of times. And that's always nice. And that's pretty much it. What questions do y'all have for me before we wrap it up for today?
You just memorized that formula? I mean, it's somewhere you look those stuff up.
There's a handout over there. You can grab that.
It's just general.
But I mean, this is specifically written that way for we'll get into it a little bit more tomorrow. But yeah, if you ever want a reference for that, the handout's right over there on that cart, the black cart over there, and you can grab that on your way out. Yeah, that's a good question. All right. Let me bring some stickers around. Folks online, if you are typing a question, keep typing it. Then we will, let's see, that's not the right one. There we go. That's not it. There it is.
Do we need to close out the computer successfully used?
Yeah, you could just exit Excel. That's really all you need to do, and just click Don't Save when it asks you. That way I don't have to.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Enjoy the class, and I'll be back tomorrow.
Fantastic. See you then.
Hope you're on time.
No worries.
So if I want to put this name right here, I put
Yeah.
Google up there, and then type the name, or just type the name?
What I would do, so if you went, no.
The next name.
Oh, okay. You would just go, in this case, you would just go =A5.
Oh,
Like that.
thank you.
Absolutely. Because that's telling it which thing to point to, which cell. There we go.
So what do we do when we go to the parking thing?
Once
Put
you,
that in the slot or how?
yeah, when you pull up to the little thing, it'll have a slot. You just load it in, and it should. That gives you 3 hours free. So as long as you've been parked there less than 3 hours, you should be good to go.
Okay.
Do I need
So,
to close this out?
we get one of these every day?
Yeah. Oh yeah. The only reason I'll just click Don't Save. The only reason that we charge for parking at all is just because if we didn't, folks who work downtown would take all of our parking. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Glad you were here, and see you tomorrow.